Welcome to the Insights in Accounting podcast with me, Rob Brown, on behalf of the Accounting Influencers Podcast Network. This is our Tuesday show where we pick something that's going on in the news that's affecting the accounting profession worldwide. Thrilled to have with me today, again, guest host Carl Reader. Good day, Carl.
Hey, Rob, really good to speak to you. But I'm a little bit concerned by the use of your word affecting, because I'm actually going to tweak that, if that's okay, for this episode and this episode only, to impacting. How does that work for you?
Well, it's an impactful word, is impacting. Affecting means it just bounces off the sides. But yeah, sure, Carl, there is a lot going on in the profession right now. We're here in the UK, but we can speak on an international stage. You've been in this game a long time. You've graced many stages internationally. What's caught your eye this week?
Well, do you know what, Rob? This one is a bit of a selfish one, but I want to talk about ProNation, which I'm sure will be new to many of the listeners. And the reason why I chose impact rather than affect is because when you go to the doctors with something that's troubling you, you talk about the effects of it. It's affecting me in doing X, Y, Z. Yeah. But when something makes an impact, it transforms you. It transforms you for the better. It allows you to do more, to be better. And that's exactly what ProNation is about. So, Rob, if I just share with the audience what ProNation is, but I'm sure that you don't want me to be giving a 15-minute sales pitch. So instead, what I'd quite like is for you to just dig a bit deeper and question me on this. So ProNation is a result of a gap in the accounting profession that we saw. We've seen plenty of gurus with plenty of theory trying to support accountants, but actually one of the real challenges is that sometimes those models don't quite work for accountants. They work for the guru, but not the accountant. What do I mean by that? They bring in vendors to sell at accountants over webinars, and that's content. They prescribe their one way of doing things. But in ProNation, we're trying to do things differently. So rather than getting vendors in just to sell to people through webinars, we want to teach accountants how to buy, how to make wise purchasing decisions, how to strategically look at where they want to be in their business, to decide what they need, to fix the gaps, to go through their process mapping and so on, and then to make an informed decision based on facts, figures, rather than based on hype and hyperbole. So what we want in the future from that is we want practitioners to take on the right tools, not the tools with the most advertising budget, but they are told are correct because everybody else is doing it. Secondly, we want to make sure that accountants don't just understand the how, but actually that they understand the why. So when it comes to practice management tips, business development tips and so on, look, myself, Lucy, Will, who are the three heads, we say three heads are better than one. We've been there, seen it, done it. And we're more than happy to share our mistakes along the way so that others don't make them. But actually, with any particular nut that we want to crack, what we want to do is to talk very clearly about the pros and cons of each approach, rather than saying my way or the highway. So timesheets is a perfect example. There's plenty of gurus out there, Bob, who are saying ditch the timesheet. But surprise, surprise, and this might come as news to your listeners, some of the very most innovative practitioners are putting timesheets back in, okay? I know myself, I've scrapped timesheets 3 times and probably put them in 4 times. That's just one example where a guru might say timesheet's bad or timesheet's good. What we want to do amongst 3 of us is to facilitate the conversation of the pros and cons of each approach and allow firms to choose their own way, be it pricing, be it marketing, be it operational structures, etc., etc. We've all built multi-million firms, so we feel like we're in a reasonably good place to do this. And my core belief behind this, Rob, is that once practitioners truly understand their why and the why behind the choice that they're making, they're far more likely to implement rather than just doing the how. Because we've seen so many firms try to buy the magic bullet, whether that's software, whether that's a sales script, whether it's whatever it is, they try and buy the magic bullet that's going to fix all the problems in their business. And actually, what needs to happen before choosing that magic bullet is a full and frank discussion to make sure that it's the right path for you. Yeah. So, Rob, that's a little bit about ProNation. But I'm sure that yourself and the listeners have got some questions.
Sure. Let's add some context here as well, Carl, because we are in a world now as we emerge from the pandemic where best practice is not always easy to define. What worked pre-pandemic doesn't necessarily work now. If we look at where accountants listen to and lean into for information, let's establish point one. They can't do it on their own. They can't afford to be isolated. They need to take information, best practice knowledge, upskill from somewhere. They might go to professional associations and institutes. They may be part of a network or an alliance. They may be part of a peer-led community, and they are all good. Or they may buy into a personal brand, a guru, a standout star that may or may not have been down the road that they're going on. But those two both have limitations.
Let me take that one step further. So I think you're absolutely right with all of that, but I want to extend that a bit further.
Yeah.
Globally, there are several accountancy markets, advisory markets, bookkeeping markets, whatever we want to put it, all believing that they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
So let's be honest. The Brits think they're the best in certain areas. The Yanks think they're the best. The Aussies think they're the best. I was on an interview this morning with an Australian journalist, and we were talking about all sorts of things around the accountancy landscape. We were talking about advisory and so on. And the Aussies listening to the show might think, oh, well, we know all of that stuff. The Yanks might be thinking, oh, yeah, we know all of this stuff. And I was thinking, I know all of this stuff. You will never believe this, Rob. We were talking about MTD and whether it has an impact on advisory. Now, I don't believe it does.
Making tax digital for our international.
Making tax digital, yes. I think that ship has passed. However, we were talking about the history of MTD.
Yeah.
And the journalist nearly fell off of his chair when I said that actually, from this initiative, we're being driven by Scandinavia and Eastern Europe.
Wow.
Who would have thought that Poland and Scandinavia were leading the way with this digitalization? Okay, so first things first, we should never write anything off. There's a real, I think there's a tribal nature globally that we tend to stick with what we know. And that's natural because we have our own national conferences, we have our own national experts, we have our own national software providers. You talk to an American and Intuit's for one, you talk to an Aussie and Xero's for one.
It's tribal, isn't it, Carl? We want to belong to something. We want to feel part of something.
It is a bit tribal. It is a bit tribal. One of the really unique things about ProNation is that even though we've just launched, we've actually acquired, as part of the process, an international group of accountants. And that is probably one of the very key differentiators between ProNation and any other community coaching program, mastermind like this, because actually there is so much we can learn. And I'll give you a case study of this, Rob. One of the members, Thomas, I met him out in Warsaw. So Thomas is Polish, and I was speaking to him, and it was really enlightening to hear not just about his average client fees and the clients he's working for, the type of work he does, the type of work he doesn't. By the way, Thomas does far more personal development and human-to-human coaching than any other accountant I've ever met. And I've been to conferences all over the place. Yeah. I've met global accountants. This guy, he's the man for this. So not only does he do that, and that's something we could all learn from him, but actually it was really powerful understanding the market dynamics, what he's been through. There were some things that were further ahead than us, some things that were far behind compared to us. And it was a really fruitful conversation. So I think for me, rather than trying to follow one bit of advice or what a software company tells us to do or what an institute tells us to do, actually, there's a real power in true collaboration. We talk about being collaborative as a profession, but are we really?
And when you look at the cliche of all drinking the same Kool-Aid or all swimming in the same pond, you naturally incline to people that have your views and think your way and talk in your language and voice your problems with your vocabulary. But there is a danger in that, getting that perspective. So in an international group here, you're right, you coined it right at the beginning. It's transformational and impactful rather than just having some kind of echo chamber or pod of people that think like you and just being slightly affected by what's going on. You are aiming to shake things up here, and you've already upset a few people in a nice way by keeping them on the toes, Carl, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a whole new offering, and I'm going to be quite honest, and perhaps I shouldn't show my card so bluntly here. I've no idea how I'm going to make a profit out of it because there's so many of us contributing and making it a reality. But it's not like we're charging the earth and running away with all the money. Actually, this genuinely is coming from a place of good, that we want a community to help each other. And we want to see it as a non-exec board that can support your firm alongside a group of mates who've got your back. Yeah. It's really interesting. We're changing the way this is done. It's effectively bringing peer-to-peer learning into play a whole lot more than has been so far. Historically, most of the approaches have been master-servant approaches, which is great for feeding the ego of the person on stage or the author of the book. But actually, to make the true impact, it has to go beyond words. It has to go beyond rhetoric. It actually has to be much deeper than that. And I think that the implementation phase only comes about when the practitioners have actually truly bought into what it is they're doing. And most accountants only truly buy into something once they fully got their head around it. We are, without wanting to stereotype, we are detailed people. And I think it's important that full and frank conversation is had. So if there's a conversation about, let's say, hourly pricing versus fixed fees versus subscription versus value-based versus market rate, and all of the noise about pricing, we know that some people are, you must value price, or you must subscription, or you must do 3 tiers, or you must do 1 tier, or you must do a menu. You've got all of these hypotheses out there, which is good. That's part of it, okay? That gives you one solution. But actually, let's say there's 10 solutions. The key part here is that the practitioner understands all 10, but not just why they're bad and outdated and not cool and they're untrendy and nobody on LinkedIn would agree with you. Forget that. Actually, look at the pros and cons of each. Yeah. Why did the first one develop? Why was it good? How did it work for people? How did it not work? What were the limitations? It takes more effort, but the end result means that actually the route that you choose might not be the latest hyped up thing, but it's the one that will work for you.
That makes sense. And when you look at the personnel involved, you run a successful accounting firm. Lucy Coyne at Mazuma does the same. Will Farnell, author of The Digital Firm, does the same. We've got Martin Bissett in there as well. He's been advising top 100 firms all over the world and accounting networks for over 25 years. And you cover the spectrum. I'm just thinking, if a guru or one person, one leader of a community hails best practice, nobody calls them out on that if there's another way. But you all are very strong, defined, authoritative personalities that will call each other out and say, well, that's not the way I do it. That's not the way that works for me. And that perspective is valuable.
And that's the key. Look, there are some really good consultative coaches that do look at very different ways of doing things. Yeah. And work on that basis. So I certainly wouldn't want to include them in this, but there are some who maybe are impacted by confirmation bias. It worked for me, so it's going to work for you. Maybe are impacted by the tools that they're selling. Whatever it is, sometimes there's a lack of acceptance that there might be other ways. And a perfect example of this is staffing. So myself, Lucy, and Will, I've been in practice for 25 years. I mean, you mentioned Martin's been on the scene for 25 years. Will's been in practice for, I've no idea, but it's going to be 20 years, I guess. I don't know, he's 15, 20 years, Lucy about the same. So we've got a whole heap of failures that allow us to pick out what works and what doesn't. But we've all grown our practices in very different ways as well. So, for example, we are fans of outsourcing rather than offshoring, but we've tried offshoring. Will is a fan of offshoring rather than outsourcing. Lucy's a fan of having staff on site. Now, there's different factors behind each of those 3 approaches that we've taken that help us decide that the route that we've chosen was the right route. And we've got different models in our firm. We've got different pricing approaches. We've got different cost structures. We've got different demographics of clients. We've got different demographics of team members. We've got different levels of seniorities within the team. And all of those have an impact on the type of team members you need to recruit. The problem is, if you hear from one person who's maybe been in practice for 10 years and done it one way, you only truly hear the option that worked for them. The option that works for us is not the option that works for Lucy, is not the option that works for Will, but that doesn't mean any of them are invalid. And that's the conversation we're trying to bring to firms.
Absolutely right. And sometimes with a guru, to scale that business, they've got to bring on associates and team members that are just promoting their own methodology. So it's more of the same, isn't it? It's something of an echo chamber. So this is what we might call an industry play. It's shaking things up. It's changing the game. It's giving accountants a fresh look at a new community for a new age, a new world, a new way of doing things. People can check it out at jointhenation.co.uk. This is open right now, Carl, as this episode goes live. What are people going to get when they go there?
As you've said, I think they're going to get the impact of being shaken up. We've got a history of disrupting things and shaking things up. You know, I know for myself, we were doing online accounting back in 2002 with the first zero partner outside of New Zealand. We were at the bleeding edge of the technological revolution. We're also one of the first firms to really narrow down on a niche, and not just niche, but micro niche. So we've been pace setters in that respect. Lucy has been a pace setter and a disruptor from subscription. Yes, it's the current trend to talk about. She was doing it back in 2007. And, you know, I know that firms started cropping up 2018, 2019, saying they're the first subscription accountancy firm. Well, Lucy was the first subscription accountancy firm. She was pioneering that. Will, back in 2012, 2013, became the first truly digital firm at a point when most firms hadn't even heard of SaaS, software as a service. So we've got a track record of shaking things up and bringing new voices to the profession, bringing new approaches to the profession. But also, what I'd like to think is that we're all humble enough to know that whilst we've disrupted things, we also can learn things. And ProNation ultimately is not a platform for us to preach our best practice that worked for us, but is actually to find the best practice that works for you.
Yeah. And if you go to jointhenation.co.uk, you can see that this is the community that you always wished for but never knew was out there. So it's launched now. Go and check it out. Thank you, Carl, for speaking on our Insights in Accounting podcast today.
Thanks, Rob.